Shalom. Thanks for joining me today. I'm continuing the series and reading from Devarim, which is also Deuteronomy, which means the second law, or the Haggadah, or the storytelling. Remember, the entire book of Deuteronomy takes place on the eastern shore of the Jordan River in a place called the Plains of Moab. And so this is Moses giving his final instructions to the nation that he has been leading in the wilderness for the last 40 years. They are getting ready to cross over the Jordan River. Moses knows already he's going to die before this happens. He has already laid his hands on Joshua, and Joshua is now becoming the leader. And after Moses dies, Joshua will fully take on the leadership role. So all this transition is taking place, and Moses is reciting all of the history that God has with the nation of Israel. And so we pick up in chapter 11, and this is where we are, of Deuteronomy 11. Therefore, you are to love Adonai, your God, and always obey his commission, regulations, rulings, and mitzvot. Today it is you I am addressing, not your children, who haven't known or experienced the discipline of Adonai your God, his greatness, his strong hand, his outstretched arm, his signs, his actions, which he did in Egypt to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and to his entire country. They didn't experience what he did to Egypt's army, horses and chariots, how Adonai overwhelmed them with the water of the Sea of Suf as they were pursuing you, so that they remain destroyed to this day. They didn't experience what he kept doing for you in the desert until you arrived at this place, or what he did to Datan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, the descendant of Reuben, how the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, along with their households, tents, and every living thing in their company, there in front of all Israel. But you have seen with your own eyes all these great deeds of Adonai. Therefore you are to keep every mitzvah I'm giving you today, so that you will be strong enough to go in and take possession of the land you are crossing over to conquer, and so that you will live long in the land Adonai swore to give to your ancestors and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. Let me pause a moment and just say, pay attention to the fact that obedience to God's mitzvah, obedience to God's commands, will make you strong enough to go in and take possession of the land. And it means you will live long in the land, and you will prosper there. Obedience to God's laws, obedience to God's commands. You know, some people feel that since Jesus has come, we no longer have to obey all of God's commands. But I want you to remember the words of Jesus. He said to his own disciples, if you love me, you will obey my commands. Now, notice the very first sentence of chapter 11. Therefore, you are to love Adonai, your God, and always obey his commission, regulations, rulings, and mitzvah. Obedience to God's command is connected to love for God. Why would I want to obey God? Because I fear him and I want to appease him or something? I want to look good. I want to earn my way. No. I have a love. I have an affection for God. And that is my motivation for love, for being obedient to God. And there's the benefit of obedience, that it will make me strong. Strong to do what? Strong to take and conquer and possess this land. Because there are wars. There are battles ahead of you, Israel. And the only way to be strong enough to do that is to be obedient to God's mitzvah. And here's an important lesson for us as believers in Jesus today. You think God called us to ignore obedience? That we can just do whatever we want to do because we belong to Jesus and we think we're totally freed from any obligation to obey God's commands? That's not what Jesus said. If you love me, you will obey my commands. Jesus said that. So this is the origin of it right here in Deuteronomy. Love the Lord your God and obey his commandments. And by the way, if you do that, you'll be strong enough to face all the battles in your life. Hang on to that. Verse 10, for the land you're entering in order to take possession of, is it like the land of Egypt? There you would sow your seed, and you had to use your feet to operate its irrigation system, as in a vegetable garden. It had kind of a pumping system where they could pump water from the Nile. But the land you're crossing over to take possession of is a land of hills and valleys, which soaks up water when rain falls from the sky. It's a land Adonai your God cares for. The eyes of Adonai your God are always on it, and from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So if you listen carefully to my mitzvah, which I'm giving you today, to love Adonai your God, and serve him with all your heart and all your being, then, says Adonai, I will give your land its rain in the right seasons, including the early fall rains and the late spring rains, so that you can gather in your wheat, new wine, and olive oil. And I will give your fields grass for your livestock, with the result that you will eat and be satisfied. But be careful, and this is important, pay attention to this now. This is verse 16. But be careful not to let yourselves be seduced, so that you turn aside, serving other gods and worshiping them. If you do, the anger of Adonai will blaze up against you. He will shut up the sky so that there will be no rain. Ground will not yield its produce, and you will quickly pass away from the good land Adonai is giving you. Therefore you are to store up these words of mine in your heart and in all your being. Tie them on your hand as a sign, and put them at the front of a headband around your forehead. Teach them carefully to your children, talking about them when you sit at home, when you're traveling on the road, when you lie down, when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your house and on your gates, so that you and your children will live long on the land Adonai swore to your ancestors that he would give them for as long as there is sky above the earth. Again, notice something. Let me just pause a minute. This is the description again of what is today called the mezuzah, that little device that is affixed to the upper right door frame of your house as you face your house, as you enter in. If you're an Orthodox Jew, you actually will put a mitzvah on every single door frame inside your house as well as outside your house. That even includes your garage, by the way. And it is usually tilting forward in towards the house, the top part tilting towards the house, because that means I'm inviting God, I'm welcoming God to come into my home. Encased inside of the mitzvah is a tiny scroll, a little parchment, where Deuteronomy chapter 4 and 6 and this chapter is all written, and it is included. It's all put in there. So they take it quite literally to write this on the doorpost of your house. When they talk about placing it over your hand and over your forehead, that's a device called a tefillin. And in a previous video, a very short video, I showed you the mezuzah that I have on my front door, the one that I have on my back door. I do not own tefillin, but I showed you what a tefillin looks like in that video. If you want to look it up, it's easy to find. Tefillin, tefillin, and that's where it's a box that you affix to the top of your forehead with leather straps. It is a box you fix on your left bicep, and it's a long leather strap, and there's a whole process for wrapping it around your fingers. The wrappings, each wrapping means something symbolically. There are multiple prayers that are said during the time. It's a spiritual experience to do this, by the way. Now, I'm not Jewish, so I don't have a tefillin, but you can see I do have a little yarmulke. And you know, I talked about earlier why I wear these. But it's important to recognize that this is what it's talking about. But notice also the connection, again, of being obedient to God's mitzvahs will cause the land itself to be fertile. And this is a big thing to catch and understand. When the land would go into long periods of drought, the people recognize, I have sinned. I have abandoned my God, and I need to turn around and come back to him. And when that happens, God releases the rain and the land becomes fertile again. Now, it's also interesting in verse 16, he's there warning, it said, be careful not to let yourselves be seduced so that you turn aside, serve other gods, and worship them. Seduction is an interesting word here. The worship of Yahweh in the tabernacle at the time, because the temple had not yet been built. So you're worshiping Yahweh in the tabernacle. You're learning now your sacrificial system. You're learning how to bring the correct offerings and for the priest to do the thing that, it takes to have sins forgiven and so forth. You're learning how to worship God. But you're also living among other cultures, and it's easy to look around and see how they live. And it's easy to look around and see what they have. And it's easy to look around and see, what their temples look like. And unlike us Israelites, we have a box in which there's a couple of tablets. And that's we don't even have an image of our God. We have no idea what our God looks like. But when we look over there at the folks who are the Hittites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Jebusites, they have temples, and inside their temple are these statues. These are their idols, and they know exactly who their God is and exactly what their God looks like, and it becomes really envious. After a while, you begin to say, how come we don't have that? And it becomes really easy to kind of fall into that trap that says, well, we can do that too. It's all right. And the times when Israel chose to do that, once at the bottom of Mount Sinai, while Moses was on the mountain receiving the Ten Commandments, but also when they had a civil war, after Solomon died, and Jeroboam went up to the northern part of the land, took 10 tribes with him, and called themselves Israel, and then he created 2 golden calves, the same thing that Aaron created at the foot of Mount Sinai in the book of Exodus, created a golden calf. And he put 1 calf in the southern city and 1 calf in the northern city. And he said to them all, these are your Elohim. These are now your gods. And so you don't have to go to Jerusalem and worship that Yahweh God, who you don't even have any idea what he looks like. But look, we have these beautiful temples. We have this gorgeous golden calf. And we can call it El, because that's also what we call Yahweh. And so here, you can just worship here. You don't have to travel that far. And if it's inconvenient for you to travel south, go north. Look, I got 2 of them. And that seduction is real easy to fall for. It's not always easy to be wholeheartedly devoted to Yahweh, especially if you don't see him and you don't know what he looks like. If all you have is a little box with a couple of stone tablets in it, it's not very appealing. And so it's real easy to be seduced by what other people have, how other people live. If you're going to follow Yahweh, if you're going to be obedient to Yahweh, you will experience benefits that others will not have. On the other hand, if they live in the same land you live in, they will have rain too. It will fall on the just and the unjust, is what the scripture says later. God will bless the whole land, not just you in the land, but he will bless the whole land, all because you are being obedient to him. So keep that in mind. Look at verse 22. I'll finish up this chapter. We get close to the end of this chapter. I'm sorry, I've already kind of gone longer than I planned to. Sorry about that. For if you will take care to obey all these mitzvot I'm giving you, to do them, to love Adonai your God, to follow all his ways and to cling to him, then Adonai will expel all these nations ahead of you, and you will dispossess nations bigger and stronger than you are. Wherever the sole of your footsteps will be yours. Your territory will extend from the desert to the Lebanon, and from the river, the Euphrates River, to the western sea. No one will be able to withstand you. Adonai your God will place the fear and dread of you on all the land you step on, as he told you. Once again, did you notice how obedience to God's commands leads to the ability to be strong? And you can take possession of the land. You can fight enemies that are bigger, more powerful than you are, and you can win. All because of your obedience to God's commands, and you will have this land. Verse 26, see, I'm setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing. If you listen to the mitzvah of Adonai your God that I'm giving you today, and the curse, if you don't listen to the mitzvah of Adonai your God, but turn aside from the way I'm ordering you today, and follow other gods that you have not known. When Adonai your God brings you into the land you're entering, in order to take possession of it, you are to put the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. Both are west of the Jordan, in the direction of the sunset, in the land of the Canaanite, living in the Arabah, across from Gilgal, near the pistachio trees of Moreh. For you are to cross the Jordan to enter and take possession of the land Adonai your God is giving you. You are to own it and live in it, and you are to take care to follow all the laws and rulings I'm setting before you today. Now, one thing I want you to hang on to before we're in this video. The two mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. Mount Ebal is the north of the valley of Shechem, and Mount Gerizim is the southern mountain. And later, at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, and you see this happening when they get inside the land, half of the nation will stand on Mount Gerizim, half of the nation will stand on Mount Ebal. On Gerizim, they recite all the list of blessings, and that comes later in the book of Deuteronomy, all the list of blessings. And on Mount Ebal, they will list all the cursings, all the curses that come. So if you listen, then you receive blessings. If you don't listen, you receive curses. And it's interesting how listen is directly connected to obey. If I'm hearing what God is saying, I'm not just letting it go in one ear and fall out the other. I'm actually acting upon it. I'm receiving it. I'm consuming it. I'm letting it become a part of me, and I am altering my lifestyle and my will and my desires to be conforming to His Word. I follow Him. I obey Him because I'm listening to Him. That's what it means to listen to God. Most of us think it just means to listen to somebody preaching a sermon, and then we go home and we feel good for a little while because we went to church. That's not what this scripture is talking about. All right, this is the end of chapter 11. Thanks.